What at first glance looked like a medical emergency turned out to be something much more disturbing. The girl's body was covered in bruises. The doctors said she had a head injury. It's a story of a life lost, a story of indifference that cost a child his life, and about the responsibility that society must share. In June 2024, a quiet neighborhood in Evansville, Indiana was shaken by tragic news. A 4-year-old girl named Octavia Aquino found herself at the center of an event usually reserved for those who have become organ donors, a so-called honor walk. Little Octavia, whose short life ended in tragic circumstances, was surrounded by grieving relatives and hospital staff. Noticeably absent was her mother, Destiny Rhodes, who had been taken into custody in connection with her daughter's untimely death. Please continue to leave your cities in the comments. It really inspires me. Thank you for your incredible support of my channel. Be sure to subscribe and consider becoming a channel sponsor to help continue raising awareness about these important issues. Please share this video with your friends. Little angels deserve to be remembered. Back to the case. Despite the darkness surrounding her short life, Octavia's legacy shone brightly. Even after passing away, this little ray of sunshine gave hope for a miracle to several other children in need. Her organs became a precious gift for those desperately waiting for a chance at life. Unfortunately, this sad ending could have been prevented if numerous warning signs hadn't been ignored by those who should have protected the little girl. Octavia's story isn't just a crime report, but a profound lesson about the importance of noticing danger signs in time and acting decisively when it comes to children's safety. Octavia's story began much earlier, in 2019, when Fort Wayne, Indiana residents Destiny Rhodes and Brandon Aquino learned they would soon become parents. On May 10, 2020, Octavia Aspen Aquino was born. The baby girl brought much joy to her large family. Although the girl was under her mother's full custody, Brandon took an active part in his daughter's life and often took her to stay with him and his mother. As it happened, Linda Alvarez, the paternal grandmother, became the person who essentially raised Octavia. The older the girl got, the more time she spent with her grandmother. Destiny and Brandon had been together for almost 7 years, but by the end of 2023, their relationship finally ended. After her parents' separation, Destiny and Octavia lived in Evansville, in the Spring Valley apartments. Destiny worked at a nearby McDonald's and shared the apartment with 2 roommates. Although Octavia was a very positive child and the roommates treated her well, the girl was especially happy when her father came and took her to Fort Wayne to stay with her grandmother. The journey took almost 5 hours, but Octavia never complained. She knew she would be living with her grandmother for a whole week, and her father would come over after work. Her uncle Caleb's family would visit, and she could play happily with her little cousin Jeremiah. For Octavia, this was a happy time filled with family warmth and care. Those who knew Octavia described her as a bright, happy girl. She laughed easily and made friends quickly at the playground. The girl loved spending time outdoors, but indoors she was always busy, playing with her toys, drawing and coloring. Octavia enjoyed dressing up and using face paint. In the evenings, she watched her favorite cartoons: Paw Patrol, Jurassic Park, The Powerpuff Girls, My Little Pony, and Cocomelon. In the last few months of 2024, Octavia spent most of her time living with her paternal grandmother. During this period, Octavia's mother began experiencing serious problems that eventually led to tragedy. Destiny was going through difficult times and had issues with her ex-boyfriend and the law. But no one could have predicted then just how dangerous this time would become for little Octavia. In early 2024, events occurred that should have been red flags for all child protection services. While investigating a missing teenager case, detectives discovered a disturbing pattern of behavior between 15-year-old Christian Gonzalez and Destiny Rhodes. According to documents, Christian went missing from his home in Fort Wayne, Indiana, in February 2024. After police found him, he was placed in a shelter for minors, but quickly ran away. As a result, police discovered Christian in the company of Destiny Rhodes at her home. Given the significant age difference between the 15-year-old teenager and the adult woman, authorities transferred Christian to a youth assistance center and then returned him to Fort Wayne. Shockingly, Destiny was arrested for a misdemeanor involving a minor in connection with Christian's case. However, Christian went missing again, coinciding with the time when Destiny's case was being heard in court. In an attempt to protect the teenager from the adult woman, a protective order was issued against Destiny Rhodes on behalf of Christian Gonzalez. This document was supposed to guarantee that Destiny could not contact the teenager. However, the reality turned out to be quite different. Given these circumstances, it's surprising and deeply troubling that Octavia was allowed to remain under her mother's legal custody, although she was actually living with her father and grandmother. The child protection system failed to function properly. Despite clear evidence of the mother's inappropriate behavior, no one initiated a check on Octavia's living conditions or questioned Destiny's ability to ensure her child's safety. This oversight ultimately cost the little girl her life. On June 10, 2024, at Destiny's request, Brandon brought their daughter from Fort Wayne to Evansville. Octavia was expected to spend the next week with her mother. If only Brandon and Linda Alvarez had known who was hiding in Destiny Rhodes' apartment, they would never have brought the girl back to her mother. But unfortunately, they didn't know, and a chain of tragic events was set in motion that couldn't be reversed. Arriving at her mother's, Octavia found herself in an environment that was completely foreign to her, and, as later became clear, extremely dangerous. In the apartment, besides her mother and her roommates, was that same Christian Gonzalez, the teenager against whom a protective order had been issued against Destiny. But instead of observing the conditions of this order, Destiny not only contacted Christian, but allowed him to live in her apartment where her little daughter was staying. To those around them, Christian was known as Alex, and few knew his true identity or the history of his relationship with Destiny. Finding herself in this setting, Octavia was left practically to fend for herself, as her mother had to work, and supervision of the girl was often entrusted to a 16-year-old boy who was completely unsuitable for this role. On the fateful morning of June 14, 2024, the quiet neighborhood of Evansville was shocked by a grim discovery on Spring Valley Road. Around 9 in the morning, one of Destiny Rhodes' roommates named Carly found 4-year-old Octavia unconscious and cold to the touch. In a panic, Carly rushed upstairs to alert the two other women, Sydney and Megan, about the horrifying situation in their home. When all three women came downstairs, they were met with a disturbing sight. Destiny's boyfriend, known to them as Alex, who also lived in the apartment, was sitting on the mattress next to the motionless Octavia and appeared eerily calm. This calmness starkly contrasted with the severity of the situation and alarmed the women. They immediately called an ambulance. The ambulance arrived at the scene, desperately trying to resuscitate the little girl before taking her to the nearest hospital. While they worked tirelessly to save Octavia's life, they couldn't help but notice disturbing marks on her fragile body. Bruises resembling fingerprints near her jawline and neck, numerous bruises on her legs, and human bite marks on her right arm. These marks clearly indicated that the girl had been subjected to violence, and this was no accident. Destiny was notified of the incident and soon returned home. Octavia's father also received the terrible news. Brandon, his brother Caleb, and their mother Linda immediately left Fort Wayne. They had several hours of tense driving ahead. They could only pray for little Octavia, who was fighting for her life alone. The family arrived 5 hours later, when doctors had already stabilized Octavia's condition and connected her to life support. Unfortunately, the girl's condition remained extremely critical, with minimal brain activity. The doctors were frank with the family. The chances of survival were minimal, and even if Octavia survived, the brain damage would be irreversible. When police arrived at the scene, they found 3 women and a teenager in the upstairs bathroom. Destiny soon arrived, and all 4 women were taken to the police station to give statements. Alex, who according to documents turned out to be 16-year-old Christian, was not initially questioned, citing his age. But the more the frightened women talked, the more disturbing picture emerged. By the evening of the same day, Destiny Rhodes and Christian Gonzalez were arrested. Christian Gonzalez was placed in a youth assistance center. Little Octavia was still alive, and the initial charges were as follows: for Rhodes family offenses, neglect of a dependent, contributing to the delinquency of a minor, and invasion of privacy; for Gonzalez battery, causing serious bodily injury, and false informing to a state administration. During the investigation of Octavia's injuries, disturbing facts about neglect and missed opportunities came to light. Destiny's roommates told authorities that Christian Gonzalez, known to them as Alex, had moved into the apartment with Destiny and Octavia just a few months earlier, in April 2024. This meant that Destiny had not only violated the protective order, but had put her daughter at risk by allowing a teenager with a questionable past to live in the same space as her child. Sydney, one of Destiny's roommates and friends, provided detectives with a chilling account of events that occurred on June 13th, the day before Octavia was found unconscious. Sydney and Destiny left for work around 11 in the morning, entrusting the care of 4-year-old Octavia to 16-year-old Christian. This decision was already irresponsible, leaving a small child in the care of a teenager, especially one with whom the mother had a complicated and problematic relationship. When Sydney returned home around 2 in the afternoon, Destiny had not yet finished her shift, which was supposed to end at 4. Entering the apartment, Sydney was met by Christian, who asked her to examine a mark on Octavia's neck. According to Christian, the little girl had woken up crying, claiming that a cat had scratched her. Although Sydney noticed red marks on Octavia's neck, she was much more concerned about bruises on the child's face and what looked like a human bite on her arm. When Sydney confronted Christian about these injuries, he pretended not to know, suggesting that the cat must also be responsible for them. Sydney also noticed a towel on Octavia's mattress, which, according to Christian, was because the child had just vomited. This was another alarming sign that should have triggered an immediate reaction in seeking medical help. Not convinced by Christian's explanations, Sydney directly asked Octavia, but the little girl, perhaps out of fear or coercion, repeated the story that the cat was responsible for her injuries. At this point, Sydney should have acted decisively, but instead, she decided to wait for Destiny to return from work. Deeply concerned, Sydney and another roommate decided to bring Octavia to Destiny's workplace at the nearby McDonald's to show her the extent of the child's injuries. When Destiny asked what happened, Octavia said that Christian had bitten her. This moment was critical. The little girl found the courage to tell the truth, exposing her abuser. But even after this revelation, none of the adults took the necessary steps to protect the child. At least 2 of Destiny's 3 roommates reported to authorities that after meeting with Destiny at work, they accompanied her and Octavia to a playground. There they noticed Octavia's unusual behavior. She showed no interest in playing, stared into space as if having a seizure, and was vomiting. But none of them thought that the girl should at least be examined by a doctor. This moment became another missed opportunity to save Octavia's life. Instead of seeking medical help, Destiny and her roommates decided to return home. Octavia spent the rest of the day and night in the apartment, where the person who had harmed her was present. Her condition obviously worsened, but no one took the necessary actions. By the morning of the next day, it was already too late. Octavia was found unconscious, with serious injuries that eventually led to her death. When detectives questioned Sydney, she denied ever witnessing physical abuse of Octavia by Christian in the past. However, she recalled that Destiny had confided in her about an incident before they lived together, when Christian had hit Octavia and left a mark. This admission shows that Destiny knew about Christian's tendency toward violence against her daughter, but still allowed him into their lives and to remain near the child. Destiny, when interviewed by authorities, claimed she didn't know what had happened while she was at work on the morning of June 14th. She had left the apartment around 7 in the morning, and her daughter was just sleeping. She admitted noticing the bite mark on Octavia's skin the day before and confronting Christian about it, who maintained the lie that the cat was responsible. In a separate interview, Destiny revealed that Octavia had told her that Christian, her 16-year-old boyfriend, had bitten her and covered her mouth. Not believing Christian's claims, Destiny decided to trick him by stating that a camera in the living room would reveal the truth. That's when Christian confessed that he had bitten Octavia but tried to justify his actions by claiming that the 4-year-old had bitten him first, and he just wanted to teach her a lesson. Octavia's relatives strongly doubt this account, describing the little girl as exceptionally sweet and gentle, asserting that she would resort to biting only as a means of self-defense. Those who knew Octavia well say she was a gentle and loving child who never showed aggression without cause. After confronting Christian, Destiny observed Octavia's strange behavior throughout the day, noting that the child didn't eat anything except a bag of Cheetos. When asked about her roommate's account of Octavia vomiting the previous evening, Destiny confirmed the incident, but attributed it to the child's anxiety. This is another example of how adults in Octavia's life ignored obvious signs that something was seriously wrong with the child. The investigator pressed Destiny further, asking if Octavia's symptoms could be the result of Christian biting and choking her daughter, to which Destiny acknowledged the possibility. She admitted she was afraid of the consequences Christian might face if she reported the bite mark to the police, fearing he would be removed from the home and that they would both face legal consequences. It's sad to realize that Destiny was much more concerned about her boyfriend's fate than about her little daughter's issues. Her decisions were not driven by concern for Octavia's well-being, but by a desire to protect Christian and her relationship with him. This led to a chain of decisions that ultimately cost an innocent child her life. Octavia's family remained at the hospital, praying for a miracle. The girl lay motionless, covered with her favorite handmade blanket. The medical staff did everything possible, but the injuries were too severe. After a day, it became clear that the girl had almost no chances. Her brain had swollen so much that a spinal hernia had occurred. On June 16th, Octavia quietly passed away, surrounded by relatives who loved her. Her family was crushed with grief but found the strength to make an important decision. Little Octavia left our world but gave other children a chance at life by becoming a donor. Her father Brandon, grandmother Linda, Uncle Caleb, and several other family members accompanied her to the operation. This was the last gesture of love for a girl whose life was so tragically cut short, and a way to ensure that her legacy would continue to live in those she helped. An autopsy was also conducted to accurately determine the cause of death. It was found that Octavia died due to blunt force trauma to the head and neck. These results confirmed investigators' suspicions that the girl had been subjected to serious violence, which led to fatal injuries. News channels exploded with the news of the little girl's murder, revealing the ugly truth about her mother and 16-year-old boyfriend. Learning about new charges brought against a mother and her boyfriend after a 4-year-old girl died this weekend. The coroner and family identified the child as Octavia Aquino. Her mother, Destiny Rhodes, is now charged with neglect of a dependent resulting in death. Her boyfriend, 16-year-old Christian Gonzalez, is charged with the girl's murder. Officials state that he will be tried as an adult. Linda Alvarez, for whom her little granddaughter was the center of the universe, couldn't come to terms with her loss. She's just one of the happiest, always smiling, energetic little girls I've ever met in my life, she said with tears in her eyes. For her and the entire Aquino family, the loss of Octavia left a wound that would never heal. The adults in the Alvarez Aquino family couldn't find the right words to explain to Caleb's little son why he would no longer be able to play with Octavia. My other son has a son who is only 2 years old, and he just kept saying, "Dad, when is Octavia coming to play with me?" And we don't know how to explain to a 2-year-old that his cousin won't be playing with him anymore. These words illustrate the depth of loss the family experienced and the difficulty of explaining such a tragedy to the youngest and most vulnerable. It was also a tremendous blow for the family that they themselves had brought the girl to the house where her mother was hiding, Christian Gonzalez, who had previously abused Octavia. If they had known about Christian's presence in Destiny's life and that he posed a danger to Octavia, they would never have allowed the girl to stay with her mother. This realization added bitterness to their already unbearable pain. It was also difficult to accept that the mother and her friends had many opportunities to seek help and prevent the girl's death. During the last 24 hours of Octavia's life, there were several moments when adults could have intervened and changed the course of events, but each time they chose the path of least resistance, unwilling to create problems or interfere in others' affairs. This collective refusal to act ultimately led to a tragic outcome. This difficult situation led the family to believe that some things need intervention at the Indiana state level. Thus, the idea of Octavia's Law was born. The idea is to require any adult, not just teachers, doctors, and social workers, to report signs of child abuse. I've felt this from day one, that the roommates should have been charged with something, Linda said. They admitted to the police that the day before, they noticed bruises all over my granddaughter's body, around her neck, on her arms, on her face. They noticed bite marks on her arms. They did nothing about it. If they had done something and taken her to the hospital, had her checked out, possibly, doctors would have noticed the brain swelling and could have done emergency surgery or something like that, and saved my granddaughter. Linda believes that if Destiny's roommates had been legally required to report suspicions of child abuse, they might have saved Octavia's life. In her opinion, any adult who notices signs of abuse against a child should be held responsible for inaction. This call for expanding responsibility for the protection of children resonated with many Indiana residents, and the initiative for Octavia's Law began to gain momentum. Advocates of Octavia's Law argue that if there had been a legal obligation for all adults to report suspicions of child abuse, with corresponding penalties for non-compliance, Destiny's roommates might have acted more decisively. Instead of just discussing among themselves the strange bruises and behavior of the girl, they could have contacted authorities who would have had the power to intervene and protect the child. As for the trial of Christian Gonzalez, justice was surprisingly swift and effective. He was tried as an adult, and the prosecution managed to prove all charges. Investigators were able to reconstruct the last days of Octavia's life and present evidence that Christian's actions led to her death. On February 21, 2025, 16-year-old Christian Gonzalez was sentenced to 60 years in prison. This severe sentence reflected the gravity of his crime and was met with public approval. At the same time, the case against Octavia's mother was moving more slowly. Rhodes is charged with neglect of a dependent resulting in death, contributing to the delinquency of a minor where the crime committed by the child is murder and invasion of privacy. Her trial was supposed to take place in March 2025, but was postponed until summer. This new delay became an additional ordeal for Octavia's family, who wanted justice to be served as soon as possible. It's really interesting what punishment will be chosen for a woman whose immature thinking and disregard for her daughter's safety and health led to a terrible tragedy, local legal experts commented. Many believe that Destiny should be held accountable not only for violating the protective order, but also for creating a dangerous environment for her child and for refusing to seek medical help when it was clearly necessary. Octavia's story caused widespread public resonance not only in Indiana but beyond. It became a bitter reminder of how important it is to vigilantly watch for signs of child abuse and act decisively when there are suspicions. This story also highlighted deficiencies in the child protection system, which should have protected Octavia but failed to do so. One of the most painful aspects of this tragedy is how many opportunities were missed to save the little girl's life. The child protection system did not respond properly to the alarming signs in the mother's behavior. The roommates noticed signs of abuse but did not take sufficient measures. Destiny learned that her boyfriend had harmed her daughter, but chose to protect him rather than the child. Even when Octavia showed obvious signs of distress, no one thought it necessary to consult a doctor. Each of these moments represented an opportunity to change the course of events and prevent the tragic outcome. But each time, the adults in Octavia's life failed in their responsibility, and as a result, the little girl paid the ultimate price. Brandon and Linda, Octavia's father and grandmother, are now forced to live not only with their pain, but also with the agonizing realization that they themselves brought the girl to her mother, unaware of the danger that threatened her there. "We should have suspected something," Brandon said in one interview. "We knew Destiny had problems, but we never thought she would put Octavia in such danger. If only we had known." This sense of guilt and regret is shared by many who were involved in Octavia's life. But perhaps the heaviest responsibility lies with the system that was supposed to protect vulnerable children. How could it happen that Destiny, who had already been caught breaking the law in connection with a minor, still had the right to custody of her child. Why did no one conduct a check on Octavia's living conditions when it became known that Destiny had violated a protective order? These questions remain unanswered, but they have prompted many to call for reform of the child protection system. The proposed Octavia's Law is just the first step. Activists and legislators are also discussing other measures, including stricter screening of parents with a history of offenses, closer cooperation between various agencies responsible for children's welfare, and increased resources for child protection services. As these debates continue, Octavia's family is trying to cope with their loss and find ways to honor the memory of the little girl. They established a charitable foundation in Octavia's name, which raises funds for children in dangerous home situations. They are also actively advocating for Octavia's Law and other measures aimed at protecting children. "We can't bring Octavia back," Linda said, "but we can try to make sure that what happened to her doesn't happen to another child. If something good comes out of her tragedy, that will be a small consolation." In memory of Octavia, the local community organized a memorial ceremony where balloons were released in her favorite colors, pink and purple. The playground where Octavia loved to play was named in her honor, and a memorial plaque was installed with her photograph and the words, "In memory of Octavia Aquino, whose smile lit up the world." These gestures cannot bring the little girl back, but they ensure that her short life will not be forgotten. For many, Octavia's story became a call to action. Parents have become more vigilant regarding signs of child abuse, and teachers and social workers more persistent in their efforts to protect children. Local authorities have begun to review their protocols and procedures related to child protection, and Indiana state legislators are seriously considering the proposal for Octavia's Law. While these changes cannot bring Octavia back or diminish her family's pain, they offer hope that something positive may come from this tragedy. If Octavia's Law is passed, if child protection systems are strengthened, if adults become more responsible for protecting vulnerable children, then perhaps Octavia's death will not have been completely in vain. In March 2025, when Destiny's trial was postponed, Octavia's family expressed their disappointment, but also their determination to continue the fight for justice. "We will be there, at every court hearing," Brandon said. "We will be Octavia's voice because she can no longer speak for herself, and we will continue to push for changes that, we hope, will protect other children from the fate that befell our little girl." The case of Octavia Aquino reminds us of the darkest sides of human nature, but also of the power of a community uniting in the face of tragedy. It reminds us of our collective responsibility to protect the most vulnerable members of society and of the need to be vigilant and act decisively when we suspect a child is in danger. Ultimately, Octavia's story is one of love, loss, and hope. Of the love of a family who mourns her, of a loss that cannot be replaced, and of hope that her short life may still lead to changes that will save other children from a similar fate. Our warm and sincere condolences to the family of little angel Octavia. Rest in peace, little angel Octavia.